Welcome to Ventre Synthetic Lubricants. Today we're talking about automatic transmission fluid. Automatic transmission fluid is quite possibly the most complex fluid in your vehicle. What I mean by this is that it has to perform many different functions, which we'll go into today. I'll tell you about that. So it's important that we have a good quality, and I'm going to show you why. So here's our rough sketch of an automatic transmission. Keep in mind, I'm not an artist and I'm not an engineer. The purpose of this drawing is just to show you what the fluid has to go through when it goes through your transmission. So basic operation, this would represent our flex plate. This is our torque converter, our oil pump, our input shaft, and then you would have some gear sets, and then you're going to go through a final drive of some sort, and then it's going to come out either a drive shaft on a rear-wheel drive vehicle. If you've got an automatic transmission, this back half of the transmission would be the differential, or it may be off to the side down here. That would be the differential, like the rear differential on a rear-wheel drive vehicle. And then if you have a four-wheel drive vehicle, then there would be another box here, which would be the transfer case. And you'd have another shaft coming back to the front. Again, basic operation. Here's our valve body, and here's our oil pan. So our fluid is all down here. And then we've got two lines that run to the front of the vehicle. The majority of vehicles, the bottom half of the radiator, or one of the sides, or sometimes it's a separate cooler, is the transmission fluid cooler. So you'd have a line going up to the front, and then a line coming back with the cool fluid. Our fluid, it goes into our oil pump, and then our oil pump pumps it into the torque converter and back into the valve body here. So the fluid starts out here in the torque converter. The front half of the torque converter spins with the engine. Then the rear half, it has a specific amount of fluid in it. And so as the front is spinning, and when that engine starts spinning faster and faster, and it's in gear, it's going to overcome the resistance, and the two sides are gonna lock together, and it's gonna spin the transmission. This is what lets you stop at a stop sign, and then as you give it gas, the engine spins faster. It overcomes that torque converter, and then it allows you to move forward. So our fluid pumps from the oil pump into our valve body. Now the valve body is a series of paths, like a maze, various different places where all the oil has to go. There's little check valves, solenoids if it's electronically controlled, and valves that all the oil goes through. So the oil goes through this maze, and it goes to the various places it needs to go. Now we've got valves in here that send the oil to the correct gear based off of what either the computer or the linkage decides for it to do. One of the types of gear sets we have here will be a multi-disc clutch plates. So we've got a clutch plate, and then a steel, and then a clutch plate, and then a steel. And then over here, we have a piston. So as this valve opens up, this fills with fluid, and then it compresses these clutch packs together, thereby engaging that planetary gear set. One of the other types is a band. So you've got a gear set in here that spins freely, and then when you want to engage it, the solenoid applies fluid it opens up, and then the valve applies fluid to the piston, and then the piston raises and it closes the band, which then locks in the gear set and allows it to turn. So those are some of the main functions of our transmission. Basic operation stuff. Different transmissions are different ways. They use different types of gear sets, things like this. But this is a basic layout that gives you kind of an idea of what the fluid has to do. I said that automatic transmission fluid is possibly the most complex fluid in your vehicle. Well, here's why. It has a bunch of different jobs. One of the jobs is to lubricate. It's got to lubricate all these moving parts, or else they're going to wear out. Just like engine oil does, or gear oil does for your differential. It's got to keep those parts from tearing each other up. But it also has to provide friction for these clutch plates. If it was just a straight lube, then they wouldn't be able to grab onto each other. They would just slip. And the bands in there, same thing. If there wasn't some sort of a friction modifier in there, then it wouldn't be able to grab that drum and engage that gear set. So it's got to have that. Now what happens is as the transmission fluid breaks down, those friction modifiers wear out, and then that's where you get slippage between the clutches and bands and things like that. It's got to last a long time. The transmission fluid, it's not like your engine oil where you pull the plug out and it all drains out and you put new oil in. Okay, when I drain the pan, I've still got fluid in the torque converter, and I've still got fluid in the oil cooler. And so in order to drain the transmission fluid, you have to basically take one of these off and put more in and let this pump out until you get all the old fluid out. Or some guys will fill it up and then drain it out, and then fill it up again, and then drain it out, and then fill it up again, and it gets expensive. Okay, so you want it to last a long time. It's not something that you want to be changing every 3,000 miles, or you'd go broke even with the cheap stuff. Another big thing is cooling. The transmission has to keep these parts cool, or else those friction plates, those bands, those things will wear out if the fluid gets too hot. They'll burn up, and then they'll start slipping and things like that again. So it has to be able to handle high heat and then take that heat up to the cooler and cool off. And it also, probably its biggest job, is the hydraulics. It's a hydraulic fluid in that it has to open and close these valves when need be. It has to engage this piston in order to compress those clutch plates, and engage this piston in order to close the band. It's also a hydraulic fluid. So automatic transmission fluid has a lot of jobs, and so it's a very complex formula. It has to be the right amount of friction and lubrication and additives for cooling and all these things. So what's the difference with AMSOIL products? AMSOIL products, their transmission fluid is just like all their other products. It's going to give you longer drain intervals, higher heat protection, better lubrication, things like that, just like all the others. AMSOIL did a test a few years back where they put the Signature Series into a fleet of taxis in Las Vegas, Nevada. They picked Las Vegas because of the high heat is really hard on the transmission, and they picked taxis because the stop and go driving, the sitting and idling, all that stuff is really hard on a transmission. So they wanted to pick the roughest situation that they could to prove out their transmission fluid. So what they did is the cabs, they normally change their transmission fluid at 20,000 miles. They took this stuff and they went 180,000 miles. And then they took one sample, it was a 2010 Charger, and they tore the transmission apart and they inspected all the parts, and it was everything was still in good condition. And then they took the fluid and they put it through the tests that all transmission fluids have to go through in order to get their certifications as various different levels of transmission fluid. And the fluid with 180,000 miles outperformed the brand new stock fluid for that Charger in all the tests. which is just pretty amazing. It shows that this stuff it's good stuff. So we've got a couple different products. There are more. They have transmission fluid for CVT transmissions and whatever, but this is your most common stuff. You've got OE in the multi-vehicle, and then there's also OE in the fuel efficient. The fuel efficient is the replacement for like Dexron 6, the GM transmission with the lower viscosity. So that's a replacement for that. Between these two, it covers almost every vehicle. If you have questions about that or whatever, you can get a hold of me on my website, and I can tell you which one you need, or you can look it up on my website, and it'll tell you which one you need. But the difference is the OE is going to be a factory replacement. It's going to be better than your factory replacement. But the Signature Series is going to give you the high temperature, severe service life aspects. If you're running a heavier duty or an application like a taxi, something like that, high heat, things like that. So it costs a little more, but it's going to give you a little bit better protection, and it's going to protect it a little bit longer. So that's it, automatic transmission fluid. If you guys want some more information, check out my website. I'll link that in the description. I'm going to put a link to that taxi cab study if you guys are interested in it. Check it out. A lot of good information in there. They also did tests with the engine oil in there as well. Comment below. Let me know if you like this style video, what you guys would like to see. Check out my website, my Facebook page, and we'll see you next time.